Hey everyone, Adam here, So Was Your Podcast. Got another interview for you today. This one's really, really cool. Hits close to home because it is an indie comic creator. I got to sit down with Allen Dunford to talk to him about his first comic, Pocus Hocus. I had to hesitate to make sure I got that right, and I did. So awesome, and now it's cheapened because I called attention to it. Anyway, Allen's comic is very cool. It has to do with a kind of wannabe magician, or what we would consider like a performer magician who sells his soul to get actual magical powers, and how that doesn't impact his life in exactly the way that he wants it to. It's really cool, really clever. The artwork is exceptional. They have a really awesome letter where the lettering adds that much to the story. It's not just what the people are saying or sound effects. Really elevates the comic. Very awesome stuff. There's 3 issues available now. Number 4 is on Kickstarter, so make sure you check out that. You can get their comics through Kickstarter as they're kind of working on a new thing. They just got a deal with Source Point Press, which is also incredible. A lot of good things happening for Allen and his team, and it was a fantastic conversation. And Allen's a super cool guy. He even stayed on after the interview to give me some help on how we can get my own comic out there. But this one's all about Allen, so enjoy the conversation and check out Pocus Hocus on Kickstarter.
Hey everyone, Adam here, So Was Your Podcast. I'm sitting down with Allen to talk about his comic Pocus Hocus, and I was really happy I didn't say that backwards. How you doing, Allen?
You got it right the first time.
I had to watch the banner scrolling by, which is why I hesitated.
Yeah, it's so funny because now whenever I hear Hocus Pocus, it's hard for me to say it, and it sounds wrong.
Oh, that one's wrong now, yeah.
Yeah, that's wrong. Okay, so if anyone out there listening to this, we are the correct way to now say it, and everyone else is wrong. So there we go.
You're redefining.
Yes, but other than that, I am great. Thank you so much for having me. And as we talked a little bit in the pre-show, life has been very hectic. So thank you for taking the time to sit down and talk to me.
Absolutely. Always happy to talk comics, especially indie creators. We got to stick together and prop each other up.
Yes, someone has to, right?
Right, exactly. Hey, Indie's going to be all that's left pretty soon, it looks like.
I feel that in my soul.
Yeah. So I guess I'll do the kind of hacky interview question and say, let's take it back to the beginning. When did you know you wanted to make comics before we even get to Pocus Hocus?
So I love this question and I hate it at the same time, because whenever I've listened to other interviews or been on other podcasts with other creators, and they give this beautifully elegant speech of, they were a child and it washed up on shore when they were at the beach, and they flipped through a comic book and knew that was what their calling in life was. The 2020 pandemic happened, and I guess the creative juices were flowing, so I didn't go crazy in isolation and all that stuff. So I contacted a good friend of mine, Will Radford, and I just simply asked him, hey, do you want to make a comic book? Because I think I have an idea. And here we are.
Okay, that's just as cool.
Yeah, it's not. I appreciate it, though. But
and I'm sure you were a fan of comics. What else would draw you to the medium?
Yeah, exactly. So, when it comes to comic books, I've always been kind of, I don't want to say sheltered from them, but I never did like my own research. You have the usuals that are thrown in your face, like the stuff that's really popular. You have Sin City, 300, V for Vendetta. And I'm like, oh, these are great. I love all these. And I love Watchmen, everything in that vein. But I never did my own outside research to really dig into the independent scene. And that's when I've really started finding a lot of comic books that I absolutely love. But I think what really sparked it for me was actually my love for manga.
Okay.
Yeah. And one in particular was Death Note. So going back and kind of seeing the story that we've written for Pocus, you see a lot of those themes in there, and we didn't realize what we were doing at the time. But it's kind of really cool to see how certain things stay with you subconsciously, especially creatively.
It's funny because as I was reading your first issue, I love the art side. I thought it all looked really, really good. Mm-hmm. And my mind never went to manga. But as soon as you said that, I was like, oh, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it's funny because one in particular, Junji Ito, he tells a lot of just crazy out of this world psychedelic horror stories and thrillers and everything. And ironically, our illustrator, Brian, he's a big fan of Ito as well. So I think you kind of start seeing that more as the series progresses, but we'll get into that here in a little bit, I'm sure.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's a relatively new idea you had, like you said, in COVID.
Yeah.
The story idea, was it a story you were kicking around in your head? Maybe you were going to do it as like a novel or a short story or something at some point?
Yeah. So the original title for this, are you ready? This is pretty groundbreaking. It was called The Magician.
Oh, okay.
Oh yeah, wild, right?
I don't know how you came up with that.
I know, genius. So I originally this came up whenever I was probably 7 or 8, and I always just kind of love magic, magicians, and stuff. And at the time, I could barely spell magician, and I can probably barely still do that now without the help of predictive text. But I wrote this little comic book that was only 1 page called The Magician, and it was just about a superhero magician, and then that was it. And it's just funny to really go back and think about it and how that has stuck with me. So originally, the idea for this, once I approached it to Will, was going to be kind of episodic. One of my favorite television shows of all time is The Twilight Zone. And one of my favorite comic book series just happens to be Ice Cream Man. And both of those have their own episodic feels to them, where they're part of this really cool interconnecting world, but every issue could stand on its own. So that's how Pocus was going to be. It was originally going to be about this evil magician who kind of pulled people on stage because he had his own demonic intentions. And we decided to kind of flip that on its head and then tell a Faustian tale with it and then build a world around it.
Okay, so you're going pretty deep from the beginning with like Twilight Zone as like a main source. Twilight Zone and manga, who tells very complex stories.
Yeah, I've just been a big fan of storytelling, and I think that's something that we wanted to capture with Pocus, especially give it its own unique sense of atmosphere the whole time too. So when we don't have these action sequences that are taking place, there's always something going on the page that has the reader interested.
Okay. It might be a little bit of an odd question, but at the same time, maybe you get it from everybody. Was there any thought to how do we either avoid or lean into Harry Potter comparisons?
So yeah, whenever we were also tossing around an idea, we had another idea that was really similar to a heavily influenced Harry Potter theme. And it was one of those, we understand where our influences come from, and we never want to really shy away from them, because I feel like if the story was naturally progressing into one way, and we said, oh well, we can't do that because it's been done in Harry Potter, it's kind of the classic, well, Simpsons already did it.
Right.
So I don't think that like the Faustian tale with Pocus, at its core, the story's been told 1,000 times, but it's how you tell it and it's your take on it, which is what makes it unique. So I think that even if we did have Harry Potter themes that we decided to even throw in there, I think that we should still just run with it, because if that's the direction that we felt the story needed to go, it would be we'd be doing ourselves a disservice if we tried to pull it away from that and then just write something completely different.
Right. And then it would probably not be exactly what you wanted it to be, just for the sake of not being compared to something that you're going to be compared to because it's magic.
Yeah, no matter what. Yeah. Yeah, he uses a wand, for God's sakes.
Right. Yeah, you put people in a fantasy setting, it's compared to Lord of the Rings. You pay people to magic, it's Harry Potter.
Yes. So we know where our inspirations come from, and these things are popular for a reason, and they're so infused into pop culture that it's just hard to avoid. Right.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And it's weird because I didn't put the Harry Potter of it together until like 2 minutes before we sat down. I got more of not that I think you were copying this in any way, but I got more of a John Constantine vibe from your main character.
Yeah. So a good friend of mine, he runs our local comic book shop, and I was talking to him about the idea, and he mentioned Constantine. He said, I like the story because it reminds me of Constantine, or I like this because it also reminds me of Preacher. And like, to me, those are great compliments. I know that some people might get put off like when they compare their work to someone else's, but to me, that's how we know that we're doing something right, because Constantine's fantastic. And if I get paired to something that I think's incredible, go us.
Right. Plus, nobody's saying, oh, I don't want to read this, it reminds me of Constantine. They're saying, this reminds me of something else I enjoy. So great.
Yeah, perfect. And I think some people really get those lines blurred, right, whenever they talk about it. But yeah, no, thank you for that. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I just thought it was cool that it was, I wasn't really sure of the exact year it was supposed to be, but, it's a little bit old-timey. Yeah. But you have kind of more modern sense of humor and dialogue to it. So it it kind of flowed really well with the character's attitude, where he's like, has this. I'm going to kind of giving away your comic now. Maybe I should let you do the the pitch.
No, that's totally fine. Yeah, we're unfortunately from where we're on issue 4, we're already kind of in the spoiler territory, right? It's hard for us to put up preview pages without giving something away. Or to really pitch it without being like, oh well, they're going to go to hell in issue 3. So, but ultimately, at its core, Pocus Hocus is about a magician who sells his soul to a demon to have actual magical powers. And in typical tradition, how these things go, it doesn't go as planned. Crazy, right?
Yeah.
So years later, Pocus becomes jaded. He's tired of it. He wants his soul back. And then ironically, the demon who he sold his soul to comes knocking at his door and not even so much asking for a favor, but for demanding that he owns him ultimately. And he's going to do what he asks him to do.
If this is giving away too much, you can tell me to bleep it or cut it or something. But I really liked it. To me, it looked like a social commentary where he's like, I can do basically anything, and people just want to see parlor tricks.
Yeah, that was something that we talked about before. Will, the co-writer, that was kind of his direction that he wanted to take it in, and that wasn't initially how I saw it, but I loved it. Because I think we even put the line in there, people will do anything, they prefer spectacle over substance.
Right.
And we just thought that was such a cool thing because the idea behind it is that Pocus is also, he's a bit of a drunk too, because of certain life situations that put him up to this point, and that you get to see in issue 1, where his I guess his need to just feel like, well, I can be drunk on stage and do whatever I want, and people are still going to go crazy and love it. And we always thought that was kind of an interesting idea because it was cool that no one was really picking up, like audience in the story was no one really picking up that they have this guy that's just doing these demonic things on stage, levitating, shooting fire out of his hands, electricity, stuff like that, and he's putting no effort into it whatsoever. And we just loved that idea behind it, and especially when it kind of comes to a head with his assistant Emily, who she discovers that he sold his soul, which is really what projects the story forward. And she's we've always pictured Emily as the reader, as the person that's actually level-headed reading this thing. And when we have this con artist demon and then Pocus himself. So we have the good character Emily that is just trying to hold everything together and get ultimately Pocus and herself out of the situation that she feels like she's now wrapped up into.
Yeah, I liked having that audience perspective without it like breaking the fourth wall or something.
Yep.
You've mentioned a few of your collaborators so far. Have you had the same creative team since number 1?
Yeah, so it's been myself, Will Radford as the writers and creators, Brian Belando, who does all of our illustrations, Jason Smith, he's our colorist, and Dave Lentz is our letterer and designer.
The coloring was something I wanted to mention specifically. I mean, it all looked really great, but the more subtle use of your color, I thought was a really genius move.
Yeah. So obviously, whenever we first did it, the initial thing, we were like, well, it's kind of funny how these questions kind of come back to repeat themselves. We're like, well, Sin City kind of did this, where they have the black and white and then a splash of reds. They're like, whatever, we'll keep doing it. It's going to tell our story. So that's another example of do what you feel is right.
Right.
So Pocus Hocus takes place in a black and white world, but anytime anything magic is on screen, it's in a bright burst of color. So that way we always kind of have something that's going on, or if the reader notices something in the corner that's in color, they're like, oh, well, what could that be? And we really like that idea because especially taking a risk with a brand new IP and starting it linearly instead of starting it in the middle. We could have started it right in the middle where Pocus was in hell fighting demons, and then we could have done the classic Lifetime movie record scratch and Pocus being like, you may have wondered how I got here, right? and then we just twist it back. But we wanted to tell the story from beginning, middle, and end because that's how we've always envisioned it. But as we progress through the story, especially once you guys even see in the preview pages on the 4th campaign, whenever we get to hell, everything's in bright colors, but Pocus himself is actually still in black and white. That's because he doesn't have a soul. So there's nothing magical about him, or I don't want to say the word special, but on Earth he's hailed as the world greatest magician. But once he gets down there, he's just a soulless husk. And we thought that was kind of a cool way to flip it on its head a little bit.
That is really cool. Yeah, I love that. And not only are the colors cool the way they punch out, but there's really nice like kind of glow effects and things like that really make them pop even more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the team has done way more than we could ever ask for on this.
Were these people that you knew before, or did you like reach out to a friend and he said, "Hey, I know this guy who's also into," and you kind of put it together, or is it all kind of contacts you had?
Yeah, so Pocus Hocus is mine and Will's very first comic book, and the team is the very first people that we've ever worked with. So a good friend of ours, Mike Teener, who works with Bad Bug Media, he has made a really good career for himself in the independent comic scene, and he's just growing. So shout out to Mike. Thank you for everything, because he was the one that kind of gave us a list of illustrators he thinks would be good for the project, and then a list of colorists who he's worked with before he thinks would be good to work with this vision that we've had, and then only one letterer. So I guess we got stuck with Dave.
Yeah, a lot of people, I think, on the outside kind of look at the letter and don't think it's that important, and it really is.
We lucked out, because Dave has been instrumental for what I would call the success of this comic book series. For issues 1 and 2, he was a letterer, designer, and then a project manager. He was making sure everything was good. He still does, obviously, all of our quality control, because he still has an eye for it. And like I said, from where this is mine and Will's first comic book, we're still learning as we go. And without Dave, I really don't think that we would even be here talking right now, just because he's really kind of been just key to getting it how it needs to look, where it needs to go. And I think the best compliment that he gave us was once we got to issue 3, because we would send him the script. He would kind of, I don't want to say tear it apart, but he would adjust, send back notes. Once we got to issue 3, he said, "I don't have any notes for you guys. This is great."
You kind of found your footing.
Yeah. So that was when it's like, "Thanks, Dad."
Yeah.
I'm proud of you, son. It was one of those moments. So
right.
That's when I think I peaked in comic books. So I don't think I need to make any more now.
No, you're done at 4 then.
Yeah. All right. I'll catch you guys later.
To kind of pull back the curtain even further, do you find that it's kind of a double-edged sword where every issue you're getting better, but that means issue 1 you're like, oh, we didn't, and I'm not saying this is a judgment or a comic, but maybe you feel like you didn't put your best foot forward, because by issue 4 you're like, we figured all this out.
Yeah. So I'll answer that with yes and no. Right. So you go back and look at your first issue after you get to this point, because you're so happy with how issue 2 turned out, issue 3 and issue 4. And we think each issue gets better as it goes. But I think any creator wants to say that, right?
Right.
But when you go back and look at your issue 1, you think there's stuff that I wish I would have done differently a little bit, but it got us to where this point was, and that was the best that we could give at that time. So it's one of those, like, you definitely stand by your work. But one thing that I will give us credit for is that Will and I were, I'd never use this term, but we were smart for once with storyboarding how we wanted the first arc to go. So I think that gave us a lot of ground to stand on, because we knew where each issue was going. So, and we knew this little subtleties that we were going to need to project the story forward, and little items that we were going to be kind of sprinkling in there to let the reader be like, oh, they talked about that in issue 1. So we were very forward thinking, especially with it being our first book. So I hope that answered your question. I'm sorry I rambled for a second.
No, absolutely. No, this is great.
Yeah.
With that kind of thing where you had seeds planted that were paying off later, how far ahead did you outline your story?
Yeah, so we outlined our story. Originally, it was for 6 issues. We already outlined it. But again, some of the stuff's unpredictable. We are going to be expanding the story, because the world that we were writing and the reception has been so awesome that we were able to grow the story organically, instead of trying to rush it and just put out something that was once a hobby that is now turning into something, fingers crossed, one day could be so much more.
Right. Yeah. That's always the fun part too. Is it's almost a good thing from a writer's perspective, where your outline kind of goes out the window to a degree.
Yeah, no, for real. Yeah. So we stick true with where we want our story beats to be, but we understand where we can throw in wiggle room and it still makes sense and pushes the story forward, and it's able to let the world breathe that much more.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. That's awesome. For your first few issues are currently done, and I had asked you before, but it's probably good information to get out there.
Yeah.
People who are listening to this right now, I mean, you're on Kickstarter, so that's great. We should definitely talk about that.
Mhm.
How do they go about getting 1 through 3 and then supporting 4?
Yeah, so this answer is a little tricky because I guess it's a two-parter. So naturally, we always encourage back the Kickstarter because that way it shows the support that way, and we always want to see our audience expanding that way as well. But if you happen to miss the Kickstarter or just need some additional information, just reach out to anyone on the team. Pocus Hocus Comic at gmail.com is a good way. I'm on Twitter at Chaps of Fury, and any of the other guys with all their socials, they'd be happy to point you in the right direction and we'll get you what you need. So the other part to that question, Pocus actually just got picked up by SourcePoint Press. So it's pretty unreal for us because this time last year we just finished Pocus 1. So this has been a very breakneck speed process for Pocus and for our first comic book, and I'm still trying to even figure out the indie industry. It's been very stressful, but a very fun ride altogether. So we'll have more information on how to be able to purchase the comic through SourcePoint at a later date. But as of right now, just reach out to us directly or message us on Kickstarter or follow along with the Kickstarter.
Very cool. And speaking of your Kickstarter, you had sent me another email with a bunch of information. You have a lot of really cool tiers. So you want to do a breakdown of that for everybody?
Yeah, definitely. Without getting too long-winded with it, we always want to cater to the existing audience, the people that have been there since issue 1 or issue 2, and we also want to cater to new people as well. So that was one of the reasons why we decided, especially in this issue, to include a trade paperback. Um, we felt like we already knew we were going to do one, so we didn't want to set up a separate Kickstarter for it when people were going to come in, potentially people that are new, and then they backed issues 1 through 4 floppy when they would have just bought a trade paperback instead. So we obviously take the consideration of our fans, new and old, first, and want to make sure everyone is happy and able to get stuff that they want. So we also, with that being said, we also set up the Kickstarter to where it's kind of like a build your own tier. So pretty much at any tier you back, you can add on anything from any previous tier that you want. So it doesn't feel like you're being strong armed into getting something that you don't really want. Because sometimes you do see the tiers on other campaigns that are like bigger tiers where it's like, well, I really want this, but I also don't want to get this. So we decided to just kind of let it breathe a little bit and let everyone pick what they want.
Right, more of an a la carte system.
Yes, absolutely. So naturally, we have the main cover, and then we have 3 beautiful variant covers that you can get. I'm a sucker for them anyway for t-shirts, and we have 2 really cool and fun designs on there. And then we even throw it back to the 90s. We got a couple hollow foil covers and some metal covers, and we even took a leap and we did the trade paperback in a metal form as well.
Oh, very cool. That's awesome.
Yeah, which I think a lot of people are really going to like that. But there's 2 items in particular on this campaign that I really want to talk about. One of those, well, both of them are comic books written by Will and myself. One of them happens to be Horus in Hell, which is Pocus's rabbit Horus. Everyone absolutely loves him, and it was really funny to us because we would joke about it initially. He was the character that was getting the most buzz, but he was the one we spent the least amount of time on. So we have all the storyboards for the demon and Pocus and for Emily, and then Horus was just a rabbit that we threw in there because it was getting a lot of really good reception. But since then, Horus has become a major player in all this, and it's just been fun to watch him kind of develop too. So we have a Horus in Hell ash can, which is 8 pages drawn by Kit Wallace, who has done a variant cover for us for each issue of Pocus, and he works on a lot of stuff with SourcePoint, like Good Boy, for example, and We Eat Gods. He's an all-around amazing guy and creator, and he loved that rabbit. So he decided to go ahead and make an 8-page origin story for Horus that we are putting on there as an add-on. And the other thing that I'm really excited to talk about is an ash can on here for our next comic book coming out. And it's by the entire Pocus Hocus team, and it's called Grandma Chainsaw. And it does what it says on the label. Yeah.
That's a great title.
Yes. That Grandma Chainsaw it's what you think it is. It's a slasher, horror, dark comedy, vein of Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Evil Dead, those kinds of things. And it's just about a granny that just kills people.
How is your team keeping up with two separate titles?
These guys are machines, and I'm very happy with them agreeing to these projects that we're doing and some future ones that we're ready to reveal at a later date. But yeah, these guys are awesome, and I really could not ask for a better team. And I feel like if it isn't broke, don't fix it. And
Right.
I also hate change. So I think that's another reason why I really like working with these guys as well. But yeah, no, I tell these guys all the time, but I really could not have asked for a better team. These guys are awesome.
That's awesome. I mean, I love that you're pushing your primary comic still and that you're still going hard on it. But I also love that you have these other ideas and you're like, well, guys, you want to just keep working harder?
Yeah, so that's the thing, because we never want to be those people that lets a story slip too much, but we are realistic. People do need breaks from their projects, and to not focus on it too much, because then I feel like that's when it can get tired and stale. So something like Grandma Chainsaw, which is so vastly different from Pocus, we feel like that's kind of good for us to really get the creative juices flowing and to keep topping ourselves with Pocus and the world that we're creating with that.
Yeah, I do see your point. It's hard to find that balance where it's like you want to focus on Pocus Hocus. Sorry about the rhyming. And you want to make it as good as it can be, but you also need to take that break, but you don't want to take too long of a break. It's this crazy juggling act that you have to figure out.
Yeah, and that's the thing, right? Especially with the nature of being independent, because you also want to stay fresh and current, and you also want to keep pumping your IP out, but you also do need to take time for yourself and reflect on what you've done so you can improve going forward. And even us just writing the first script for Grandma Chainsaw, and we've already got the first half of issue 2 for Grandma Chainsaw done. It has helped us so much, because the storyboard that we had for the next 3 issues of Pocus, which it's kind of cool because whenever we go to launch those, it's going to be Pocus 2-1. So it's really cool to see like that second arc already forming in such a short amount of time.
Yeah.
But the storyboard we had has already changed so much, just because we were able to take that break, and we were so much happier with how it's changed. So yeah, I definitely think that people do need breaks.
Yeah, I agree. I think anyone who's gone through a creative endeavor knows that if you're too nose to the grindstone, you kind of lose your way just as much as if you only touch it whenever you get around to it.
Yeah,
you dabble.
So, and that's the thing, right? It sounds like an oxymoron, right? But you have to really find that happy middle of taking a break and then still pushing out the other project. So, and plus too, it's not even so much from a writer standpoint. I feel like it's in everybody. Because I don't want Brian to get bored of drawing the same characters over and over again. Even though we introduce fun new characters each issue, it's still at its core, we have your main characters that you're always going to see. And you don't want Jason to get bored of coloring the same characters again, and Dave lettering the same way over and over again, because I just feel like it's a giant cohesive group where we don't want any of the wheels to fall off at any point, because we all need ourselves at our best. And the response for Grandma Chainsaw from the team alone has just been incredible, and it's really got them creative and excited to work on Pocus more, which is cool, because that's what you want. Everyone's like, oh, they're like, oh, we're so excited to work on Grandma Chainsaw. Hey, check out this new page for Pocus that I did. So I don't know, it's just really cool.
Yeah, you kind of take a break from the main project with a fun side project. And
yes.
Is the look of Grandma Chainsaw like drastically? Do you kind of just let them like, hey, do something completely different, just go off the wall? And
yeah. So what I told Brian initially, whenever I told him the idea behind it, because Brian, he he draws a lot of his influence, I feel like, from Hellboy, because that's actually one of his comic books that that's his dream comic to draw, right? And I hope Dark Horse never discovers him, because I want him all for myself. Because as soon as he takes off, he's gone. We're never going to see him again. But Brian's he loves horror, and so does everyone on the team. And whenever I told him the idea for it, he was so excited that he finally gets to work on something like this. And the look and feel of it, you can obviously tell it's his style because he has some signature techniques that he uses, but it looks a lot different, and that's what we wanted. And especially with Jason, he captured this totally different world, because whenever you look at Pocus, it's a lot of gray tones in the main world, and whenever you go to Hell, a lot of reds, ambers, yellows, greens, even. But in Grandma Chainsaw, he uses a lot of aquatic colors. And it's really cool because it feels like this outside world is kind of underwater. But it really gives you that sense of haze and fog for this mysterious place we're about to really get into.
Yeah, that's cool. I love that. I love thinking about like an artist, you can follow their work and you see their signature, but at the same time, it's a totally different thing. I think it's so cool to see.
Yeah, definitely. And it's cool to see. I actually talked about this with Brian the other day. It's funny that we mention it here. We all have grown so much in a year. From even, Will and I have grown as writers, and working with each other. Jason's coloring, we could tell, is different, because especially with your first issue, everyone's trying to fill each other out and figure out, does this work? Does this not work? Because your first issue is really everyone getting together and finding out what works and what doesn't. And then you can see the progression as the story goes. So I feel like everyone's in such a good rhythm right now. And it's cool to have a team where you can send them the script and be like, all right, have fun, because you know that they're going to deliver the best project or the best product possible. And another thing that I want to mention too, what's awesome is, and I didn't think about this till recently, Brian actually edited some of the script for Pocus 4. He moved some of the panels around because he felt like it would look better this way or this way. And it's cool to have that, because that means he cares, right? Instead of just drawing what we have written, he's like, no, I think this will look better here because I still want the best product possible. So I definitely think, even as writers, we need to lean on everyone on the team and ask them what they think, because Brian, Jason, Dave are so much more experienced than Will and myself that it'd be foolish for us to waste their insights.
Yeah, for sure, because you picked them up as the creative team to be the creative team. I mean, you're also a creative, but you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, granted, I might be doing it wrong. I don't know. But whenever you go to a comic book shop, you can't judge a book by its cover. But in comic books, it's a little different, because sometimes you can. If an art doesn't immediately grab you, or a title doesn't grab you, you may not open it up. And whenever you do open up a comic book, you don't read the words first. You take in what you're seeing visually. And that's kind of my mentality on trust your creative team, because they already know that, whether it's spoken or not. They know that if someone looks at your comic book, especially preview pages on Kickstarter, the first thing people are going to do is just look at the artwork and maybe scroll by really quick. They're not going to read what we wrote. So it's why you got to be really selective with what you put on there, and what's represented on the page overall. Yeah,
that's smart. And you said maybe I don't think there is a right and wrong. I think as long as your comic's coming out and it's coming out the way you want it to, you're doing it right.
Perfect. Yeah, and we are our own worst critics. So if we are even halfway happy with our comic book, we think that other people will be too.
Yeah, and that's really what you got to do, because if you try to make it to please everybody, it's going to be this watered down thing that you don't even recognize.
Right. And that's one thing that it's going to sound like a critique, but it's not. With Source Point Press, they're very hands off, and that's awesome, because they let the creators do their thing, because we got picked up for a reason.
Exactly,
and they see that, so they're letting us just do our own thing, and they're just send us the final project whenever it's done. And it's like, well, okay, thanks. See ya.
That's exactly what a creative wants in a business partner.
Because it's, again, our first comic book, and then we got picked up with our first series. So we're still trying to figure it out. And then even, we knew that Source Point were good people to work with prior to getting picked up. It still was unreal, because I felt like I was doing something wrong by not hearing from them. And Dave, our letterer, who's been in this industry for a while, he's like, no, you're doing the right thing. If you're doing something wrong, then you would have heard from them. So
right.
okay.
Hearing from them, yeah.
No news is good news. Got it.
Exactly. Well, Alan, thanks for coming on and talking to me about Pocus Hocus. I think it's really cool. The artwork really blew me away. I thought the story was, I did mention a couple things it reminded me of, but I do think it's a very original story. So I think people should check it out.
Well, hey, I really appreciate it, Adam, and thank you again, man, for taking time out of your busy day to interview me. And yeah, I cannot wait to come back on again, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime. We'll do it again. You want to give the Kickstarter one more time? I mean, I'll have the link in the show notes, of course, but if you just want to...
No, I think everyone's tired of me talking about it.
Okay.
Yeah, so as of right now, we have 8 days left on the project recording from this. So it ends on the 28th of July. And we've been very happy with the turnout on this one so far. And obviously we just want to keep growing. So thank you everyone for even listening this long to me rambling, and thank you for checking out the campaign. Your guys' love and support, and especially even from awesome content creators like you guys here at So Wizard. Just thank you guys.
Awesome. Well, thanks again. Good luck.
I appreciate it.
I'd like to thank Alan one more time for coming on the show to talk to me about Pocus Hocus, to talk to me about Grandma Chainsaw. A lot of cool stuff coming from him and his team. I love that they kept the team together. That speaks volumes for how they enjoy working with each other and how the collaboration is going. As I said a couple times, Pocus Hocus is on Kickstarter right now. It's a good time to jump on to get not just the 4th issue that they're actually kickstarting, but a good way to get his first 3. And there's also some collaboration things in there that he mentioned. Check him out online. Check him out. Drop him an email. He's happy to talk to anybody. And he's going to be coming through Source Point Press soon, so be on the lookout for that as well. A lot of big things coming, which is awesome to see for an indie creator. Make sure you like and subscribe, do the bell subscription, whatever it's all called right now. You're not going to want to miss out because we have a lot more interviews, a lot more new movie coverage. Amazon screeners are just stacking up. Other movies review, comic reviews. We're going to get back to unboxings. We're going to get back to theme park coverage, in the geek realm of things. Very cool stuff coming. You're not going to want to miss out. Speaking of not wanting to miss out, make sure you check out So Wizard Podcast every single week wherever you get your podcasts. So Wizard Podcast can also be found on Patreon, where for just $1 a month you get additional monthly bonus episodes, both audio and video. SoWizardPodcast.com is your resource for reviews, recommendations, videos, merchandise, and more. We love hearing feedback, so drop us a note in the comments, leave us something on social media. All the accounts will be found after the show and in the show notes. And on a more personal note, as I briefly mentioned, and I hammer it onto you guys all the time, I have my own comedy comic series out. It's called Social Studies. Follows a group of friends through high school as they learn who they are, how to socialize, always having each other's backs, dealing with all those crazy high school things in a funny light, styled and inspired by the Nicktoons that we grew up on and inspired us, other cartoons as well, of course. We got 9 issues currently available, 2 more coming any day now. I know I've been saying that for a while. Out of my hands, sorry, we're working on it. You go to socialstudiescomic.com or Comixology, including Comixology Unlimited. Thanks.